There are just a few of the ways you could know Seth Rogen, and now he's giving you a different way to get to know him, which is through Yearbook, a collection of kind of essays about his life and stories about being his life, ranging from getting high with his father-in-law and him passing out in a steakhouse to a near-death experience with a tiger. The book is candid. It's honest in a way that books aren't often honest. It's extremely funny. And joining me to talk about it is Vancouver's very own Seth Rogen. How are you?
Great, thank you. What a lovely introduction.
Well, we're done. We don't have any time left now.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I keep long credits just for that reason.
Yeah, you know what? By the time you get through the second page of IMDb,
Exactly.
you got to go talk to Mary Hart. Also, you don't get Vancouver's very own often, I'm guessing.
Not as often as I would like. No.
You start your book in a really interesting way. You talk about how you started getting into comedy when you were a kid, and your first act was about your grandparents. I wonder if you could tell me about your grandparents and why they were so funny.
Um, I mean, it's one of these. American Pickle actually got into it a little bit. I mean, it's just like how different you can be from the previous generations. My grandmother was born in a caravan fleeing, the pogroms of Eastern Europe. In the early 1900s. My grandfather was born in Winnipeg, but he was a very tough, he fought in World War II. He played football. Um, and yeah, when my sister, and they didn't like me very much my entire childhood. They just were not that interested in me. And then when my sister was preparing for her bat mitzvah, yeah, she was 13, so I was 10. I didn't want to go to synagogue, so my parents would drop me off at their house every Friday. And that was really the first time I started spending a lot of time with them. And when I was 10 and 11, and yeah, and they were hilarious and they were deaf. And that was the main thing that I know is they were deaf, but they would scream at each other all night. And they didn't know what the other person was arguing about, but they would just scream at each other. And so yeah, that's what some of my first jokes were about was my grandparents.
And they liked it. Like I was expecting that turn in the memoir to be like, and then she sat me down and said, if you ever joke about me that way, like they were into it.
No, my whole family's into it. Right now, what I'm dealing with is that my sister is unhappy that she's not in the book more. So yeah, I think and I wasn't expecting that either. I was worried with my grandparents, yeah, that they never liked it. But yeah, the truth is that like when I started writing jokes about other things, they were very insulted.
You seem to have no fear about stand up when you were 12 years old. Like I think a lot of 12-year-old kids would be afraid to get up at a school assembly or something like that, but you seem to have no fear about it.
No, I was much more afraid of like speaking to a girl like one on one in class than I was like getting up in front of 200 people and telling jokes. Like, I did not have I look back honestly at how little fear I had when it comes to stand up, and I ascribe it to I think it's just because I was young and I just didn't know that I didn't understand the stakes of it. I didn't understand the kind of and they weren't my friends and my peers. And I don't think that when I look back probably had a lot to do with it. Is like it specifically was people I was never gonna see again. Like, and because I was underage, that fact was even more compounded, like they were old people I was never going to see again. Like I really didn't care what they thought that much, which is not a good thing for a stand-up, but that was how I felt genuinely. Was I was somewhat unintimidated by most audiences because I felt like they were adults, and I genuinely didn't I was not that swayed by what they thought.
Yeah, like it was like putting on a costume or something like that.
Yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I've grown much more sensitive to putting myself out there in some ways. But I've also become more calloused probably over the years.
I can't ride a bike, and I can't ride a bike, and
All right,
I think it's
fun.
too late for me to learn, Seth.
You could learn, I think.
I think it's because I know what happens when you fall now, and when you're like 9 years old, you don't know what happens when you fall. Everything's okay.
No, it's a similar thing. Yeah, I think I in the book I make the analogy to like those like Shen Yun, like little tiny like Chinese acrobat kids. Like they don't know how dangerous it is what they're doing. They're getting like tossed 30 feet in the air. Like if they knew the stakes, they would not be allowing that to happen.
I like how you also said like you can ride a bike, man.
Yeah, you could. I think you could. You seem like you've pulled off harder things than that.
I got bad gravity. I'm a bit of a tripper. I feel like
You can still do it. I know very uncoordinated people who ride bikes.
around the same time you meet Evan Goldberg, who would become your writing partner and your best buddy. Tell me when you realized that you and Evan sort of would be best pals.
Pretty soon after we met. And I think at that age that happens pretty fast. Yeah, me and Evan, I think I knew him a little bit, but I was at this girl Julia Marinis's bat mitzvah, and it was a very pressurized situation, this whole year of going to bar and bat mitzvahs, which I did when I was 13. Every weekend I was at a bar and bat mitzvah. And yeah, I was going to go to high school the next year. I was nervous about that. I really, there's a lot of dancing at bar and bat mitzvahs. So it was kind of like your first like foray into maybe like romantic world if you're me. But yeah, I remember, I was very preoccupied with kind of what the other kids thought of me. And then I remember seeing these two kids at Julia's bat mitzvah just cutting open glow sticks and dumping the glowing ooze on themselves. And they seemed to be having a really good time. And I went over and met them, and it was Sammy and Evan who went on to become my best friends, and the namesakes of the characters in Superbad are named after them, and myself, and I truly think by the end of Julia's bat mitzvah, we were best friends. And we were literally chemically bonded by the noxious ooze that we were dumping on ourselves throughout the course of the evening.
And you started writing Superbad when you were kids as well, you and Evan. Like
Yeah.
what makes like 13, 14-year-old kids start writing a movie?
Again, probably the same thing that makes them start doing stand-up, just a blind hubris, like a total lack of understanding at how the world works to a degree that you were willing to just try a thing that probably have no right trying, But yeah, I just thought we could do it. And so did he. We just thought like, why not? And that's the funny thing with art is like, people try to apply this to art, I find, but it is not the case. Is there's no precedent for art for having to have done it a long time to be good at it.
Yeah.
I think like other jobs, like you want an experienced surgeon,
Yeah.
you want an experienced
Dentist.
airplane pilot,
Yeah.
maybe things like that. There's very famous examples of like actors who like their first role is incredible and timeless and something that people look back on for decades as a marvel. There's Orson Welles made Citizen Kane when he was 24 years old, he had not been making movies a long time. And so what's interesting, yeah, is that it's a job that there is no precedent for experience lending itself to quality, And so I think some part of us recognize that, and we're just like, why couldn't teenagers write a movie about teenagers in high school? Like, if anything, we're the best suited people to be doing this. Why do we have to be old to write a movie about this? If anything, it'd be weirder if we were old trying to write a movie about this, And again, with art, like it wasn't even like, why do we have to have been doing this a long time in order to be good at it? Like, Haley Joel Osment was a good actor when he was 8 years old or something, So it's like, why? Like, you don't have to be acting a long time to be great at it. Like, this kid's been alive 8 years and he's great at it, And so I think, yeah, there's this thing with art that's interesting, which is like, you can be good your first time out,
Yeah, and you can only be good your first time out. Or like
Yeah.
like a lot of people will come in to talk to me, and what they'll end up saying to me is something along the lines of like, I'm just trying to get back to what I was before I made. Like, these are people who are worth billions of dollars, and they're trying to get back to what that was when they made their first thing, right?
Oh yeah, and I very much recognize that we probably can't, and that still the first thing we made is probably by most metrics considered our best thing. But I think part of that is because it's our first thing, and it's it's different because of that. It's because it's the first time people were exposed to our writing and our sensibilities and our, our take on things. And, in the 15 years or whatever it is since Superbad came out, like, it's not as fresh as it was simply because like you have received product from us before, a lot of them. I'm amazed that we're still able to make anything that people are remotely interested in. If anything, I don't think it's like a marvel that the first thing we made was our best thing. I more think it's incredible that things we made subsequently are considered to be remotely as good as that thing, which some of them are, which I'm very happy about.
I guess it's because I still feel like I still feel when I watch anything that you make that I still feel a lot of that guy with Evan.
Yeah.
Just essentially saying like, wouldn't it be funny if?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that is part of it. Is we really are not trying to recapture anything. If anything, we're constantly trying to push ourselves to do new and exciting things that we find like very personally entertaining. And that's like first and foremost what we are chasing is like, what do we want to be watching? And that changes over the years. You know what I mean?
That doesn't get harder when it's like, yeah, we want to do whatever we want to be funny, but like also there's like a studio now, and you know what I mean? Like just bigger stakes. I'm always curious about that stuff.
Like I think a part of it, what plays to our advantage is like we came up in the studio system. Like Superbad was a studio movie. The first sets I were on were 40-Year-Old Virgin, Anchorman.
Yeah, Freaks and Geeks was an NBC. Like it was a real deal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Freaks and Geeks was an NBC show. I was a writer for a Fox network show when I was my first job, So like I actually came up and I recognize this more and more with a lot of my friends who came up in a more independent world is like I came up in like as infrastructurally a mainstream a setting as you could, basically. Like the first movies I worked on were like Universal, Columbia Pictures, real studio. I remember, it's funny, my wife still talks about it, but when we first started dating, was between when we shot 40-Year-Old Virgin and when it came out. And there was no trailers or commercials for anything for it. I remember inviting her to a screening for it and being like, I made this movie and we're doing like a test screening for it. Do you want to come? And I remember it's like the logo, like the Universal logo came up at the beginning and she was like, it's a real movie. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's a real movie. She's like, I didn't think it was a real movie. Like, I thought it was like some little, like tiny little movie that like maybe one day would see the light of day, and not like bomb, like big, and I was like, oh no, like, and honestly, like, because she went to film school, she grew up came up in an independent world, so it was not her assumption that is what we had made. But my first job were on NBC and Fox and things like that. So in my head, like, no, a movie was a movie. It was a studio movie, and independent movies were honestly not even something I was that interested in pursuing. That wasn't the audience that I was trying to capture.
Well, I think that leads pretty well to the book, right? Because I want to be as generous as I can here because I really loved it. Like I really, really loved it. And I do find lessons in it, and I have read reviews that are like, oh, it's a very, very funny book, but don't go looking for any deep analysis here. But like, I actually do find some of it, and maybe we'll get into that. But it does feel like you were trying to just make an entertaining book for a bunch of people to find entertaining.
For sure. That's 100% what I was trying to do. I was trying to make something funny. And honestly, like one of the most encouraging messages I've been getting a lot of on social media in the last few days as the book has come out is a lot of people saying like, this is the first book I've read in 10 years. And like, that is honestly like kind of the audience I was going for, is people who don't generally look to books for the thing that they want, which is just like entertainment. And that's something that I thought a lot about and as I was writing the book and kind of have been trying to reconcile. It was one of the things, kind of the hurdles I thought is like entertainment is not what books are always for. Like when you make a movie, like you want it to have lessons and insight and all this stuff, but like it's for entertainment, like it can't be boring. It has to be funny. It has to, if you're making a comedy, like it has to get laughs every few minutes or you're failing, you know what I mean? And I wanted to focus on making a book that was very honest and about me and my experiences, but I first and foremost wanted to make something that was a form of entertainment. And again, I think in order for something to be entertaining, it has to tick more boxes than just, is this funny? I think it has to be relatable. It has to feel honest, and it has to at least feel like it, is trying to provide some insight, even if it's just into the person who is writing the story. But yeah, that my main directive to myself was to write something that would entertain people and be funny for people. Yeah.
And I guess I wondered, like, do we not value that enough?
I can tell you for sure, as someone who has done this a very long time, nothing is valued less on this planet creatively than comedy. It is by far the least valued creative output. It's like I've seen my wife has done puzzles that have gotten more praise than entire comedic films that we've made. Like
Sorry.
like that is factual. Like no one thinks anything is easier than comedy. Nothing is. It is just. It is not viewed as something that is hard to do. It is not rewarded. It is not acclaimed. It is not lauded. Only not like there's almost like this ratio where like the less funny your comedy is trying to be, the more acclaim it gets. You know what I mean? Like a Wes Anderson movie is funny. It's not trying to like kill in a theater. It's not like it's trying to like. It's not like his goal is like I want people like laughing hysterically every minute. You know what I mean?
It's humorous, rather than it's
exactly. But with our movies, we're trying to destroy, and we're also trying to have great stories and great characters and emotional moments and things like that. But like, it's almost like the funnier your movie is, the less people in general think that you worked hard on it.
So in order to have, I guess, both success and like happiness making the stuff that you're making, do you have to sort of
come to terms with that?
Yeah, like do you have to sort of silence the part of your brain that wants that Daniel Day-Lewisness?
For sure. And if anything, I'm grateful. I've come to the place that I'm incredibly grateful that is not a part of my career experience, is trying to be rewarded for our work in any way beyond audiences liking it. And we like it when critics like our work as well. And I think that helps audiences like our work if it is viewed as good by the consensus of those who view these things. You know what I mean? But as far as like awards go, no, that is not a part of my current, like, it's not something I consider, and it's not something that I care about really. And honestly, thank God for that, because if it was, it would just take up so much more time and energy than my job already does. And it already takes up quite a bit of time and energy.
But it also feels like that gives you like true joy. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
like a purer joy.
For sure. Yeah, we're not chasing like the approval. We're really chasing the approval of our audience. We're not as much chasing the approval of our peers, for better or worse.
But this is all very interesting because there are stakes, and you do go into the like stakes that are bigger than any kind of more critically acclaimed Vincent Gallo film. Like you look at the interview, and you talk about the interview, and this kind of the one movie you do go in depth in on the book, where the interview is about a talk show host who lands an interview with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and the CIA asks if he can assassinate Kim Jong-un on the trip, and an ambassador to North Korea calls it an act of war. Sony ends up getting hacked by North Korea. Thousands of internal emails were leaked online. You had full-time armed security.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you were gonna die?
No more than I think I'm going to die on the average day-to-day basis, which is like somewhat. I was not worried about. I was maybe, as always, if anything, more worried about a crazy American person killing me, which again could be said about pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but predating the interview as well. But that was more my fear. I wasn't afraid of like a North Korean agent coming to West Hollywood to get me. I was more afraid of like some crazy American person. I can't even rationalize why, but mostly that's what I was afraid of. Is like, is some weirdo American going to kill me? But even still, I wouldn't say I was incredibly worried about it. I'd say I was like a little worried about it, but not, I wasn't like, I wasn't losing sleep over it,
What I know this is a bit broad, but like, what was it like to live through all that?
It was very stressful at the time and unpleasant. And you know, as I talk about in the book, and I think this speaks to what a shallow person I am, like what really hurt was that the movie itself was getting shit all over a lot, and that people seemed to be asking a lot of like, is it worth it for this movie? Which I thought, again, which to me was just a very hurtful conversation to be having because it was very much attacking the quality of our work and implying that if maybe we were smarter, that it would be worthwhile, which I don't. Again, it was just that's an unpleasant conversation. But truthfully, I think it was a great recalibration for my gauges as far as like what is actually controversial. I think a lot of comedians especially talk about controversy and being wrapped up in controversy and stepping into controversial waters and feeling as though they're really the center of a big whirlwind of news or something like that. And I look at a lot of that and think like that what you think is controversy is not. Like some people mad at you on Twitter or something, that's not controversy. Like you're trending for 10 minutes because whatever, someone doesn't like what you said, like that's not controversial. Like unless like the president is dedicating entire news conferences for it, unless there's documentaries.
Which did happen,
books.
like Obama had to talk about your film.
Yeah, like there's university courses about it. Like that is controversy, But what I also saw is how wrapped up in everyone's own everyone is, and as much as I felt like I was the center of the universe from it and had genuine fear, like will I be able to keep working? Is this something that will like stay on me forever? Has this like tainted everyone's perception of me in some way? I found that just like no, like people forgot about it like so fast and were so wrapped up in themselves that like it was not. I remember I was on Howard Stern a few months later. He was just like, "Was that a big thing?" I was like, "Yes, that was a big thing." Yeah, it wasn't that big a thing.
Well, was that big? And yeah, because you talk in the book about like that, like it was on at 3 p.m. on Comedy Central, like this thing that had ruined your life briefly.
Yeah, it'll be on like TBS, it'll be on Comedy Central one afternoon. Like it's just it could not be more normal now, and that's what's also so funny is it's something where it's like. Yeah, like as soon as some movie's like airing with like Tide commercials interrupting it, you're like, this is not controversial anymore.
Like, is there a lesson in that? Like, it reminded me of like something that I think Conan said one time about like he was getting off the NBC show or going to the TBS show or something like that, and he went to Dick Cavett and was like, I don't know what to do about what my legacy is going to be. And he was like, man, go visit Clark Gable's grave. I think it was Clark Gable. He was like, Clark Gable at one point was like the most famous human that could possibly ever exist. Like not even just that did exist, but like there had never been a famous person as worldwide famous as Clark Gable. He was like, who's hanging out with Clark Gable's grave these days? Like who's writing blogs about Clark Gable? Like, this is fleeting. Yeah. You know what I mean?
No, I do. It's funny. And it was actually probably a very therapeutic and important moment for me. A few years ago, I was on my good friend Billy Eichner's show, Billy on the Street, and the sketch was that I was actually the cameraman, so I was obscuring my face. But we went around New York, and he told New Yorkers that I had died.
Miss. Sorry, Seth Rogen passed away. Any thoughts?
And the joke was that he told people I died, and then I came out actually as the cameraman. And what was sobering, I would say, which is not a word I use lightly, was how few people gave a flying that I died in any way, shape, or form.
Seth Rogen's alive.
I have the slightest idea who that guy is.
Okay, great.
It was, I would say, uninteresting to most people would be the best word I could define it as.
What a thing to go through. That's like that's like an exposure therapy, It
was, but in a way it was great and very freeing in a lot of ways because like I do think every famous person should be exposed to that to see that like as wrapped up as you are in your own shit, as important as all this seems to you, like who the fuck knows? Like, you don't know. And that's the other thing is you don't know. Like, like people hated Moby Dick till like 100 years after that motherfucker died, you don't know. Like, they could, who knows? Like, for like, again, like, yeah, like the Green Hornet could be the greatest movie of all time in 100 years from now. Like, you don't know these things. And so, like, I think that is also something that I think about a lot. Like one of my favorite movies ever is The General, and it's a Buster Keaton movie, and it's interesting because history on films kind of gets rewritten. What Rotten Tomatoes does is the publications, not the same critic, but the publication themselves will resubmit reviews for certain movies. So like if the Hollywood Reporter gave 2001: A Space Odyssey a bad review in the 60s when it came out, then in like 1995 they'll publish another review that will like erase the old review and make a new one. So that is why that movie has like 100% now on Rotten Tomatoes if you go to it. But the truth is, it was not a unanimously well-received film when it came out, And The General is a Buster Keaton film that's now viewed as one of the best comedies of all time. I think on the AFI top 100 list, it's like it's in the top 5 movies and the only comedy in the first top like 50 probably. And when it came out, everyone hated it. They thought it was too violent. They didn't get it. They didn't think it was funny. They thought it was too expensive. They didn't like how he was mixing violence and comedy and action and comedy. They thought that was in poor taste, how people were dying in the movie. And now it's viewed as one of the best films of all time, And so I think like the fact that happens to be one of my favorite movies is also like it's a good thing to remember, where it's like, who knows? Like maybe everyone will hate all these movies forever. Maybe the movies that people seem to like now, they'll forget about. Maybe the movies people don't like now, they'll love later. Like none of that fucking matters because it'll all just be dust one day.
But that's kind of it, right? That is kind of it.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it less meaningful what you're doing.
No, not at all. It makes it less stressful.
Can I ask you? I want to ask you about a line in the book that's stuck out to me, which is where you talk about. We talk about drugs. You talk about weed. You write, "Drugs give me insights to my own behaviors that I haven't found elsewhere."
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of an insight or just something you've learned about yourself through that?
For sure. Sometimes I think, and this is a common thing in life, is you just you do things. You get into rhythms, you get into habits. An opportunity comes up, you take it. You take opportunities. That's what you're conditioned to do. And yeah, I've been. There's been times when I've been. Hold on one moment. My wife is stalking around my office. I think she's gonna ask me for something.
No problem.
What do you want? Yes. It's okay.
What's she saying?
She wanted some weed.
Oh, that's all right. That's what we're talking about. It's all right.
Exactly. It was perfect timing.
Is that where you keep the weed? You keep the weed in your office?
I just happened to have brought it up here with me. I think it's all over the house, but I think I took it from where she is downstairs and brought it up here. I think you get in these patterns of doing things. And like, yeah, I was at a point, I mean, very specifically, I remembered a time, and I kind of referenced it in the book, where, yeah, I'd taken a few jobs. Me and Evan had signed on to direct a pilot, and it was kind of going poorly, but it just seemed like a good opportunity. And meanwhile, we had signed on to direct another movie as well that seemed very controversial. But again, we were like, that's what we do. It's fine. And then we did tons of shrooms one night, and I quit both those jobs the next morning with Evan. Like, he agreed. And it was like, while we were on shrooms, like, we were having a good time. And there was a moment where we both looked at each other and we're like, are you thinking about what I'm thinking about? And he's like, I am, and we shouldn't talk about it right now. And I was like, I think we should. And he's like, and then literally, like, we're like, we should just not do them. He's like, yep, that's it. Let's not talk about it anymore. And then the next morning, we quit 2 jobs. And like, it was something that would not have happened, I think, as easily had we not been on a very large amount of hallucinogenic drugs. But it was something that, I mean, it was a very measurable moment of getting insight into something both of us getting insight into some things we had been doing, and all of a sudden, realizing that they were not panning out or going, or we weren't doing them for the reasons we should be doing them, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's profound for me, because I think like when you first showed up in, and I could be wrong about this, but when you first showed up, say around 40-Year-Old Virgin, around Knocked Up, like I think you were like a real canary in the coal mine for happy weed usage in American press. Like up until then, you were either scared to admit it and you were like keeping it from other people, or you were Cheech Marin. Like, and no disrespect to Cheech Marin, but like,
No.
you were one of those two things. And I think that what you did was actually talk about the what it does for you, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I think I was definitely, and I had David Letterman and Jay Leno and Jimmy Kimmel and Conan and all these guys like tell me this to my face very explicitly, as like they're like, because at some point I feel like I asked Letterman or one of them, just like, why do you ask me about this all the time? like I'm more than happy to talk about it, honestly, but I just like, why, you know? And they're just like, honestly, because no one will talk about it. Like, and because you will. And they're like, it's too good to pass up on that. Like, they're just like, we know a lot of famous people smoke weed and a lot of people smoke weed, but no one will just speak about it. And you are a successful, functional member of society. So it's interesting. And I feel like it took, David Letterman or someone like that saying that to me to be like, I get it. Like, I am representing something that is not represented on television, in interviews, in the media that much, which is like someone who like unabashedly smokes weed all day and does not judge themselves for it and is incredibly productive, and professional, and someone, who punctual, yeah, it really. I remember I did Letterman once a few years ago, or years ago, and it was the first time like you do these pre-interviews where they, a lot of those talk shows are pretty like meticulously planned out as far as like they'll ask you this question, you go into this story. So you've been on any vacations lately? Oh yeah, I just got back from this place, Yeah. And it was the first time he literally, and I was on for a long time. Sometimes I was on those talk shows for like 15 minutes, 2 or 3 segments, he threw out every question he had and just asked me about weed the entire time. And like, very honest, when do you smoke it? How do you smoke it? Do you wake up and smoke? Are you stoned right now? Do you act stoned? Do you write like how? And it felt very real to me, and he felt genuinely curious, and it was one of those things that so many people would reference and so many people would talk to me about as a very, if you smoke weed, a great moment for them, where it was just like, yeah, like you could look, and because I remember when I was young, I did have more shame about it, and I would hear that I remember hearing like Jack Nicholson smokes weed, Harrison Ford smokes weed, and I remember being like, oh, that's amazing, like you can do it, you can be like a productive, successful person and smoke weed, like I didn't understand. I didn't think that was. I was worried that wasn't the case. You know what I mean? And so I was always also happy to talk about it because I hoped it made other people feel better, and I hope because I knew it made me feel better, and I also found, I think when we made Pineapple Express is like when we found that like when we speak to people about weed, it's like it really can land well, like that movie became so beloved among people who smoke weed, especially, that it just really was encouraging and showed us like, oh, like this is an audience that like we do really understand because we are them. And so like it's not like we're interlopers. It's not like we're trying to appeal to potheads, but we're not. It's like, oh no, if we can really speak to this audience because we are this audience, and if we put a lot of thought and work and energy into things for this audience, they'll be really appreciative of it, and because also the subtext with a movie like Pineapple Express is that like stoned people made this movie, and it's a real movie that got, well received and made tons of money. Like, and I think that's very validating for a lot of people as well, which is like, oh, like you can be stoned and make a movie that people like, not just make it about being stoned, but clearly made by people who are stoned as well,
Yeah, and a departure from the like, if you're not stoned, oh, come on, man, you got to get on board, that kind of thing.
Oh, no,
like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we made it a real movie, and that was a learning experience and a real philosophy we had, which was like, what if we treated a weed product like it wasn't a weed product and it was just a good product, you know? And that was really, I think, what made Pineapple Express work so well. Is we were like, oh, it's about weed, it's about potheads, but we're gonna make it do all the things a good movie does. It'll have arcs, characters, stories. It'll be emotional. It'll be relatable. You know, it'll be fun. It'll be structured well. You know, it'll have a good production value. We'll get good actors, good director. You know, and so I think that was also very like cathartic for people in a way to see like, oh, this is what weed can be handled like this. Like it doesn't have to seem dumb. It can be professional and as well presented as any other subject matter, you know.
Did you go back to Canada when the legalization happened?
A few times, yeah. We have a weed company, Houseplant in Canada and America, but yeah, I've been back a lot of times since legalization has happened. Yeah,
it's interesting what happened. You know, like that it became, I think, in line for the weed store.
Yeah,
I think people were shocked or surprised at. Now, how do I say that? I think when people in line at the weed store, there was a greater. There was a different situation in the line than people thought they were. I think what I'm trying to say is that like there were people in suits. You know what I mean? Like there were people.
Yeah. Well, Canada went around its legalization in what I would describe as a terrible way.
I didn't expect terrible at all. I really thought, you know.
I think the entire philosophy with which Canada legalized weed is wrong. They're acting like it's a concession. They're acting like the entire take is like, in order to destroy the illicit market or the illegal market, we will legalize weed. But the truth is, weed should have never been illegal in the first place, ever. The only reason it's illegal is for racist reasons. And Canada has not reconciled that. And that is not as ingrained into the philosophy behind this as it needs to be, you know? The fact alcohol is objectively more dangerous than weed, 100%. Any doctor will tell you that. The fact that it is far less regulated than weed speaks to the lapse in logic and judgment that has been applied to the regulation of weed. It is being regulated in a way that makes no sense. It's hard to define. The rules with the liquids is insane as far as how they're measuring volume. There's no logic behind it. It is, as I said in a word, terrible.
So what's your ideal? As legalization is starting to roll in across the United States now, I think we can imagine in a world that in 20, 30 years, the entire country could be, whether that's true or not, but we can imagine that kind of world. What's the ideal?
I think it should be. I think closer to how alcohol is treated is probably better. In that in America, I mean, alcohol does not seem that regulated. And to what I'll say is like, think about this: there's still a huge amount of weed being sold illegally in Canada.
Yeah.
I bet there's no alcohol being sold illegally in Canada.
No.
Why is that? Because one industry has no need to do anything illegal because the regulations don't provide any hurdles that are not easily overcome. And that is the problem. If you don't want there to be criminality associated with weed, then make it easy for people. Don't put up roadblocks that make someone go, oh, if I want to do this, I have to break the law. And that is how alcohol is. There are bootleggers. It's a very small industry. You know what I mean? When's the last time you bought illegal beer? It's easy to make beer. If you want to make beer, the hurdles are easy to overcome. At no point does a microbrewer go, maybe I should be making my beer illegally. It's not like that. You can make your beer legally if you want to. That's where weed should be.
This is fascinating to me. Listen, it's been great to talk to you. I want to make a quick turn before we go away from weed and away from the book. I want to talk just briefly about one of your movies and a scene that means a lot to us here on Q for whatever reason. Take a listen to this.
These eyes are crying. These eyes have seen a lot of love, but they're never gonna see another one like I have.
That is crying. That is These Eyes by the Guess Who. That is maybe, I think, I was saying to someone last night that I think that These Eyes scene in Superbad is my favorite scene in a movie.
These eyes are crying. These eyes have seen a lot of love, but they're never gonna see another one like I have with you.
Can you tell me how that ended up in Superbad?
Yeah, for sure. It's fun. That party. So me and Evan and Sammy, the real me and Evan and Sammy, actually, when we were in high school, a stand-up comic I know was moving from Vancouver to Montreal, and he had a going away party. And me and Sammy and Evan went, and we were 15 maybe. And everyone at the party was like stand-up comics in their 20s and 30s. And people started doing cocaine. People got way too messed up and started being very aggressive with us, and that there was a pig, and even at that, so that party that they wind up at in Superbad is very much based on this party that we went to, specifically that idea that you're like trapped in a room with a bunch of lunatics on cocaine, basically, and. Yeah, we had this idea. There's this running joke in the movie where that Michael Cera looks like someone named Jimmy's brother.
Yeah.
That is said a few times, and that Jimmy's brother is a good singer. And so, yeah, it was mostly just we had this idea that Michael got himself stuck in this situation where he's trying to find a phone and make a phone call to call the girl that he's trying to buy beer for, and in doing that, he finds himself stuck in a room with these cokeheads, and the only way to get out of it is to sing for them, and he sings These Eyes.
These eyes.
It actually was not the only song he sang. We did a version with the Thong Song by Cisco.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Which Michael Cera requested because he's like, I already know every word to the Thong Song, so we should also do a take with the Thong Song. And I was like, why do you already know every word to the Thong Song? He's like, I just do. Don't worry, I do. And so we did. And then what was funny also, he's like, I don't know all the words to These Eyes. And we're like, that's kind of funnier. It doesn't matter. If you don't know the words, you should kind of just try to sing along. And so that is what created what is like probably the funniest moment where he's like, with you, because he didn't know the words and he was just kind of making it up as he went along. But yeah, it was wonderful. I could have watched Michael do that like most things. I could watch Michael do that all day long.
For whatever reason, it landed deeply in our office. And as soon as we found out, we were lucky to have you, and we've been looking forward to having you.
Canadian boy singing a Canadian song in a movie written by two Canadians. It's a lot coming together.
It's beautiful for the CBC. Seth, nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. I appreciate it.
Seth Rogen's new book, Yearbook, is out everywhere now.